Hi, my name is Mhlauli-Moses with Healthy Black Woman and Successful Black Woman. And today I'm here with my good friend Shakita Graham, who is from lovingtheblackman.com. How are you doing today, Shakita?
I'm doing really great, Noma. How are you?
I'm doing great too. I always love talking to you. Shakita, for those of you who don't know her, is the founder of lovingtheblackman.com, but she's also and you can correct me if I get it wrong because the techie world is a little foreign to me. You're a network engineer, yes?
Yes.
She happens to work as a full-time employee, right, as a network engineer. And as if that were not enough, she also is a homeschooling mom like I am, along with her husband. And she also has, of course, side hustles, which I always encourage. One of them is a tech co, which I particularly took interest in because it's a platform for that homeschoolers like my kids and her kids can use to learn, correct? Right.
Yes, absolutely.
So the topic today, what we're going to discuss, is something we were actually kind of talking about a little bit before we got started with the segment. Shaquita and I occasionally watch the show Real Housewives of Atlanta. And I was telling her about the episode this past Sunday where Kim Fields has now joined the cast. And there was a part where Kim Fields was actually crying because she was on a 3 or 4 day trip, which was just a ladies' trip. And for her, this had been the first time in years that she had actually been away from her kids. I think her kids are, one is 7 and the other one I'm not sure, I think maybe 2 or 3 years old. So her kids are still small. And it had been the first time, it was the first time she'd ever been away from her kids and her husband for more than 24 hours. And it had been years since she'd done that. And she broke down and she was crying. And the other ladies couldn't understand why she was crying that much. And part of the reason she says that she was breaking down and crying was she thought it was a beautiful place. She thought it was a great experience. And part of the reason why she was really crying was she felt like she could have shared this experience with her husband and it would have been so much more fun. She could have shared it with her whole family. And then the other thing is, of course, as is almost normal now with the reality shows, there was a lot of fighting and bickering, and she was kind of like, I mean, we traveled to this beautiful place to have this beautiful experience, and you all are here, you know, going at each other, and we're in a beautiful place. I mean, I don't have to be here doing this. I could be with my husband, and I'm missing him right now, so this makes it even worse. I think that's what I kind of grasped from it. But on the other hand, I was also thinking, come on, Kim. You saw your husband 2 hours ago. Woman up, okay? Really, honestly, are you really going to have a boo-hoo party just because you haven't seen your husband in some hours? Really grow up. Stop it. However, it did get me thinking, and I'll let you also, say what you have to say about it. It did get me thinking that Kim was in a crowd of women that was very different from hers. And the reason why I came up with this title was, does Kim Fields know that Real Housewives of Atlanta is where marriages go to die? Okay? This show has, and will destroy your marriage, and I wonder, does she know that? And did she fortify herself and her husband and her marriage before she went on this show? So what do you think, Shaquita?
Well, I'm with you from the standpoint of it's really going to come down to balance, right? Because if she goes into this with the wrong slant on things, she could easily destroy her marriage and her family. Because number one, this show is about certain things, and it has to do with kind of what the dynamic is between these external relationships. And when I say external, I mean external to your own family in a sense. So there can be a level of neglect. And I know that when I've taken on certain ventures, I have had to sit down with my husband and say, look, this is what this is going to require of me. Even to be a network engineer, I have to do a lot of studying and for hours and hours on end. So I had to go over that with him and make sure that he was willing to support me, because I was going to have to shift a lot of my attention away from things that I normally do. But at the same time, even though he was willing to support me, I had to still understand that I had a responsibility and I couldn't completely get rid of it. I mean, I still had to make sure that I cooked at times, that I spent time with him, even though I was just really, frustrated many times with studying. I still had to make sure that I knew what was going on with my kids. And with a new venture like this, Kim is going to struggle with those things, I believe.
Okay, so you're admitting, okay, maybe it could work, but it's certainly going to take some very deliberate actions to try and make it work.
Definitely deliberate actions, and I still don't know if it could work because, again, the show has a certain demographic, it has a certain focus, and it really is a focus that can be contrary to family values, right? So if you're a family person going on, I mean, every now and then I might want to take a vacation away from my husband, but 4 days vacations, going to clubs, taking on large projects with other people outside of my family, all of those things can jeopardize. It takes a really strong harmony to keep your marriage and your family together. And little things or things that consume a lot of time or that take your focus, impact your personality, all of those things threaten a harmony in your relationship. So even if they do come to terms and say, hey, this is a money-making opportunity for the family, I'm willing to support you, it may tip the harmony to a point where it's very hard to reestablish it.
Okay. So just a little bit about Kim Fields. I think I mentioned to you that I read an article recently, it was maybe last week, that talked about the net worth of the women on this show, The Real Housewives of Atlanta. And I think the people with the top two highest net worths were her and Candy. I just can't remember which one of them was first and which was second. Okay. So she's certainly not struggling for money. Because again, she's been doing a lot ever since she, stepped away from, I think she's had 2 full-time shows. What was the first one again? Was much earlier in her career.
Facts of Life.
Facts of Life. And then I used to see her on Living Single. And that was a successful show that ran for years. And then I know she's done movies and guest spots and other things over the years. But I also understand that she's done a lot of writing, directing, producing, a lot of other things, and she has other business ventures. So she's been busy. However, she's a person who has stayed close to her family in the sense that even though she's doing all these things, she's not traveling a lot. And maybe if she does it with her husband and with her kids. So she's done a good job of staying very close to her husband and her kids.
Yeah.
And she's put in the time and the effort, like you mentioned in our prior conversation, that it takes to sustain her family life. And it does take a lot of time and effort. And it's easy to neglect that time and effort if you get caught up in other things. Then the other thing is, she says that her husband is her best friend. They're always together. They're really close. They do most things together, and they don't go that long without seeing each other, not more than 24 hours. And again, like you mentioned, this show may very well contradict that. If you watch the show, obviously they tape. And we see them only when they're being taped, and they obviously have other times where they're not on camera and going about their lives, and we don't know what they're doing. However, it is very demanding. They have to be at each other's events. They have to travel together. They have to spend time together, because at the end of the day, the show wouldn't be interesting if everybody was just at their own houses watching TV. It would be dull and boring. So the show does contradict normalcy in the sense that I think you're similar to me in the sense that you actually don't mind normalcy. You don't want a whole bunch of drama. You don't want a whole bunch of stuff going on that's disrupting your home life, especially when you can't really discern if at the end of the day, even if there's some, monetary reward, is it worth it if it's going to start tearing things apart? Go ahead.
Well, it's just like anything, any project that you're working on, any business endeavor, marriage and family requires a lot of discipline. It requires a lot of prioritizing. And so if you see someone who's starting a major enterprise, they have to have their schedule, very meticulously planned out or worked out. They have to have goals. They have to have a strategy. So, this is something for people who are very focused. And again, when you get into dealing with people that don't have your same values, people that you don't really know, activities that you're not used to being involved in. So that's something that takes your attention away from your main priority, and again that allows you to neglect. So that's why a lot of times you'll see these stories where people will attack women and say they're not being a good mother, or they're not being a good wife because they're focused on being in the clubs, or they're focused on their money or their career. So I like what you talk about with the M3. It's a balance. You have to focus on the money. You have to focus on the marriage. You have to focus on all of these things. And it's difficult when you have something that does not complement it. Like you said, it's kind of on the other end of the spectrum. First of all, when it comes down to it, when you build the right kind of marriage, your husband is the only one who's truly there for you. When things go bad, it goes bad for you both. When things go good, it goes good for you both. Those other people who you're spending time with, you never know how they may react in the good times or the bad times. I mean, you can predict what's going to happen in the bad times. So that's why you don't necessarily want to go and spend 4 days with people who, just are not really in your inner circle.
Right. And they don't have to deal with the consequences of your family falling apart.
Exactly.
And to lead into that, there's this piece of advice that stuck in my head. I can't remember where I heard it. And it said that you should be very mindful of not taking advice from people who don't have to deal with the consequences of that advice. And I'm reminded of, just to give examples of this show, I know that there was Nene Leakes, who this season hasn't shown up at all, or maybe not much. And her marriage ended in divorce. Now, granted, down the line, she did, her and her husband did come back together and they got married again. Mm-hmm. I'm reminded of Portia Williams, who at the time, I can't remember what the last name was. That was her married last name, but she was married to a former football player, Cordell. And their marriage was only a year old when they went on that show, and it didn't last much longer after that. And I remember distinctly one episode, maybe last season or a season ago, or a couple of seasons ago, where her and the women were going to a strip club, and she was, she was having a conflict in the sense that, everybody's going here. There are married women here. There are women here who say they're Christians like me, talking about Portia, and they're okay with going to this club, but I'm not sure if I'm okay with it, and I'm not sure if my husband's okay with it. And she brought it up, and she said, I think I want to talk to my husband about this and figure out if he's okay with it or not. And if he's adamant that I shouldn't go, then I may need to reconsider this. And the whole lot of them were, oh my goodness, what is this, the 1950s? You need to be your own woman. You need to this and that. Now, mind you, I do agree. A woman needs to be her own woman. But anybody who's been married and sustained that marriage in a healthy way knows that there is give and take. And you do have to consider that everything that you do reflects not just on you, but also on your partner. And you do have to kind of have this the sense of having a consensus of what's right and what's wrong with one another. I think sometimes you can feel strongly about something and your partner is saying, I really don't think that's a good idea, but you feel strongly enough that you're going to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I respect your value, your viewpoint, but this is important to me and I'm going to do it in spite of the fact that you don't necessarily agree with it. And I would hope that a husband or even a wife would be able to say, yep, I don't agree with it, but I respect you enough to know that you're your own person and you can do what you choose. You see, there's a difference between that and just saying, I don't care, I am me and I'm whatever and I'm going to do what I like. Needless to say, Portia's marriage ended up in divorce. And now the thing that we're seeing again is Peter Thomas and Cynthia Bailey, who've only been married, I think, 5 years or so. their marriage is falling apart too. And you're going to see, I've seen on the show where, again, these friends are in her ear saying, oh my God, I heard he was seen at such and such a place with this woman. How could you tolerate that? How could he humiliate you like that? And they get into confrontations with him and ask him about it. That's none of your business. Okay? That's none of their business.
I mean,
that's between him
after
and
being
her.
married for 13 years, listen, I mean, what my husband has to say is everything. That's
Right.
outside of a pastor. That's outside of any kind of article, any kind of movie star, any kind of mentor, my parents. It's all about what he and I agree makes sense for us.
Right.
And I can't trust this person with my life if they give me their opinion or they give me their thoughts, meaning my husband, on something, and I just shrug it off like, who are you? Who the hell are you?
Exactly.
Who cares what you think?
Then what are you doing?
I mean, you know.
What are you doing? What's the point
Right.
of joining your lives?
So I would say, Kim, don't listen to the outside opinions. You know, if you need to go on a trip that's, you know, one night and you need to get back to your husband and kids, do that. Do just
Right.
that. And that's just the bottom line.
Absolutely. I agree with you in the sense that, again, I reiterate what I said before. These people who have all these opinions and are enforcing all these other things do not have to deal with the consequences after the fact. When things fall apart, you know, they might be there to listen or some stupid thing like, oh, I'm here for you. And no, you're not. Okay. You're not going to raise my kids with me. You're not going to be at my house every day supporting me and being my friend and all these other things like he was. And even if, you know, to get graphic, even if you could do all this, you don't provide one very vital thing that he did, okay?
Right.
So no, it's just not the same. But, you know, I think we're having fun with this topic and, you know, laughing here and there. But to me, the bottom line is I do have a strong opinion about Kim Fields being on this show, or anybody being on this show. And I actually think that anytime you can get, this is a businesswoman in me talking, anytime you can get in front of a large audience and you positioned yourself as a businesswoman or an actor, a singer, or anything like that, more exposure means your business is more likely to do better, okay? It's a numbers game. So I can see maybe the validity of getting on a show like this. However, I would caution that you need to be very solid in who you are as a woman, and you and your spouse need to be solid in terms of who you are as a couple. And if you're not solid, as we've seen, it can and it will fall apart. And that's the bottom line of it for me, is if you're not solid, there's a chance that it can fall apart, and it will fall apart. And then you're left with, you know, the rubble while their lives keep going on.
The rubble, right. I mean, you know, it just comes down to standards, right? We all face those challenges in life where we determine, is this worth me trading this, right?
Right.
And it has to do with your morals, your ethics, and you have to determine what those are for yourself. Some people are willing to trade in their marriage for, you know,
for
certain
fame
things.
And fortune.
They're willing to trade. Right. You know, they're willing to change their standards, their opinions based on money. And this is the thing. This is where the rubber meets the road for me, because at a certain point you have to say all money is not good money, you know, and you have to stand for something or you will fall for anything.
Everything.
And
Right.
even just regular, you know, if you're not on the Real Housewives of Atlanta, but you're just a person in everyday life, you have to figure out, what are those standards for? Where are those morals for me? And you can't let public opinion, media, propaganda, or any of those things deter you from following that path that you think is right.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation, Shaquita.
Yeah.
And this is obviously your Black women. We're Black women, keep it real, and I like to think that Shaquita and I, every time we get together, we keep it real. I'm Mhlauli-Moses with Healthy Black Women and Successful Black Women, and this is Shaquita Graham. of loving the Black man. It's been a pleasure, Shaquita.
Thank you, Noma.
Thank you, everybody, for watching.